Alright, so before we can move on to inserting information in there, we're going to need to be able to generate primary keys. And we've already taken a quick look at the UUID, but I also want to take a moment to start using a different environment for my development. I'm going to be using IntelliJ more and really for the rest of this course. So in this video we're going to just kind of go over the UUID with IntelliJ. And right now we're going to use some basic copy and paste. I don't want to overwhelm the tool and tooling that we have for AWS Lambda, but this will have a lot of powerful things, and I want to show you some of those powerful things, show you why IDEs are so much better. Cloud9 is fantastic, which is the IDE based inside of Lambda. However, it's not as good as a real one that you install on your computer. It's just, there's no matching the power between the two. So I want to take a little bit of a look at that in this video as well. So let's go ahead and jump in. So for the rest of this video series, I'm going to be coding in IntelliJ. Again, it's totally fine to use whatever IDE or text editor you are most comfortable with. And you can also continue to just use Cloud9 in the browser. However, I'm going to show you some of the power that comes with working with a real IDE when you set it up so that you can have code completion and get some insight into the code you're writing while you're writing it. It's just some stuff that Cloud9, the IDE that's inside Lambda, just doesn't do as well. So here I've created a basic package and a place for us to do our coding for the next few videos. And I've created a POC directory. So we're going to go ahead and create a few POCs very quickly. The first one we're going to be working with is the UUID. But before we do that, I want to help you set your IDE up to do a little bit more. So this will really only apply to IntelliJ. But one of the plugins that I find very useful, especially when working with Node, is if you open up this guy right here, which is your settings. You can get there from the file, settings, and you're going to want to click on plugins, and it's likely already installed with the default support, but if not, you can find it in Marketplace here. And we're going to scroll down to T and find terminal, and this basically gives you a terminal right inside of your IDE. So I have already gone ahead and enabled it, but yours will likely be unchecked. If it's checked, you're all good. So go ahead and click OK. If you had to check it, it'll restart your browser right now. I'm sorry, your IDE right now. And that's okay. It'll just take a second. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new POC class. And this POC is going to be focused around creating UUIDs. So the reason we're going to need these is everything that's going to go into our Dynamo database is going to require a UUID. We saw that in the last video because we created a table called test, which is going to require that UUID. And then we're going to be adding other data past that, but we'll focus on the UUID POC.js for now. Now, normally what you would do, you would type and you'll notice that as I type this require statement for the UUID, I don't have it. And of course that's because I haven't installed it. And this is where our terminal is going to come in very, very useful. So here we want to type in npm install UUID -- save. The -- save, of course, is going to add it to our package.json file here, so that we can have it moving forward. That other line shouldn't have been in there. Please ignore it. So now we have UUID set up, and we will go ahead and come back over here. And now if I hit Control Space, you'll notice that it automatically recognized it. This is only partially supported in Cloud9, so this is very useful and is going to make our development go much quicker. So now here, what we're going to want to do is continue to write our function. In this function, all I'm going to want to do is create a UUID and then log it to the console. So let's go ahead and get started. And that's it. So here we go. And the reason this is all going to work just so simply is UUID is actually provided by AWS Lambda. There is a number of libraries that are just considered standard. I'll be including those in the resources below, so don't worry about knowing which ones are which. But the way this works is IntelliJ is just thinking of this as a plain Node.js project. So when I install the UUID and later the AWS SDK, it emulates the environment very, very closely. So now what we're going to do is copy and paste all of this code and take it up to the server. So from this point forward, also, I'm not going to do all of the navigation and show you where things are at. At this point, we've done that several times. I'm going to assume that you know how to get to Lambda, how to get to DynamoDB, and even if I said, hey, why don't you go check out transcribe, you would be able to find that without my help. So let's go ahead and click create function, and we're going to author from scratch, and we're going to name this the same as our file without the JS extension for simplicity. Now, while I was filming these videos, Node.js 10 support came to Lambda, and I'll be including a small appendix video at the end to go over that. But for now, we're going to need to select Node 8.1, and we're going to just use our photo cloud role because it works well for the kind of stuff that we're doing right now. And we'll go ahead and create that function. And we're going to go ahead and scroll down here, and we're just going to delete all of this. Now, like I said, I already copied and pasted this into my browser, or into my clipboard. So here it is, all ready to go. So now all we have to do is click save and give her a quick test. Now when you click on test, this doesn't matter since we're not using it. So I'm going to use a good old-fashioned ASDF there, and click create, and then click test. Now if I scroll to the top, I can go check out the logs. And of course in CloudWatch, here we go. We're going to wait until it populates. And there you have it. It's creating its own record UUIDs. So we'll be using this POC into the next few videos to basically put data in, get data out, query data, and then in our photo cloud project, we'll be using this to create our primary keys for everything that we use. Okay, there you go. We used IntelliJ to create our UUID POC. Wow, that's quite the acronym. So from here, what we're going to do is we're actually going to put some data into the database with that UUID, and we'll be able to copy and paste this as a nice standard block of code to start any Lambda function. And that'll go very quickly inside of IntelliJ as compared to Lambda. So let's go ahead and get moving into the next video where we'll actually start doing all of the operations on the DynamoDB that are going to be common to our development. So we're going to get into the meat of putting data into our DynamoDB. We're going to go ahead and use the UUID POC that we created to make our primary key, and then we're going to insert just some arbitrary data into the database. This is going to get a little bit what I like to call cookbook style, which is we're going to take a function that we need to move, and we're going to create a proof of concept around it, and later we're going to find that we can copy and paste this, accelerating our development. We'll also be creating the necessary IAM entries into our photo cloud role that we created earlier, so that as we go through this, when we get to more deeper development in our original function, we won't have to worry about is our security already set up. As a matter of fact, because we did a proof of concept, it's already set up. So proof of concepts will set up things. We've talked about this, and I know I'm ranting and raving sometimes, but these are powerful. So let's go ahead and jump into this and get started. Now that we've copied and pasted that, we'll go ahead and install the AWS SDK. So we're going to go back down here to our terminal and type npm install AWS-SDK, and we want to save this because it's a part of our package, and it's installed its packages here, and we can see that under node modules that it's right there. So let's go ahead and import that guy now. And again, I want you to notice that I can just hit Control Space and it knows what it is. This is one of those powerful things about IDEs. Now that we've imported it, the next thing we want to do is actually make use of this. So in our case, I want to make sure that this gets locked into the region that we're using right now. So I'm going to call aws.config.update. This is a method that allows me to update the base settings of my AWS configuration. And in this case, I want to force the region US East 1. So this is a very useful function. There's some other things it can do as well. If you ever want to change the behavior of the AWS SDK, this is probably going to be a method you want to look at. Now that we've created our table, let's start putting some data into it. Let's create another POC class and make this one called DynamoDB. DynamoDB insert POC.js. And we'll go ahead and, because we know we want to use UUID, we'll go ahead and start with our last one so we don't have to retype this code. So let's go ahead and keep plugging along here. So the next thing I want to do after I create the UUID is to actually insert the record into DynamoDB. So we will do this by bringing in the AWS SDK. And again, you'll notice that because I have no code complete here, it's basically telling me that it's not installed. We'll go ahead and install the AWS SDK. So we're going to go back down here to our terminal and type npm install AWS-SDK. And we want to save this because it's a part of our package. And it's installed its packages here. And we can see that under node modules that it's right there. So let's go ahead and import that guy now. And again, I want you to notice that I can just hit Control Space and it knows what it is. This is one of those powerful things about IDEs. Now that we've imported it, the next thing we want to do is actually make use of this. So in our case, I want to make sure that this gets locked into the region that we're using right now. So I'm going to call aws.config.update. This is a method that allows me to update the base settings of my AWS configuration. And in this case, I want to force the region US East 1. So this is a very useful function. There's some other things it can do as well. If you ever want to change the behavior of the AWS SDK, this is probably going to be a method you want to look at. Now that I have that in there, I'm going to want to make sure that I can access DynamoDB's API. So there are two types of APIs for DynamoDB. There's the core API, which is very powerful, very low level. And then there's something called the document client, which is much easier to work with and still very powerful, but really geared more towards development's day-to-day work. So if you're going to be querying stuff out and adding it in and those kind of things, then you want to work with document client. If you're going to be manipulating structures and really low level indexes, then you'll probably want to work with the lower level APIs. So let's go ahead and use document client for the majority of this course. Again, I'm going to just stop a few more times and show you. It knows that the AWS has these different types of methods and constants on them. So it's going to give you this code complete and let you save a lot of time so that you don't have to type all of this stuff out by hand. So This is the power of doing it over here. I'll stop ranting and raving about it now, but I find it super useful and it makes me code much faster, has been my experience. Next thing I want to show you is how it can recognize the methods on the objects that we're creating for AWS, as well as when you pass it parameters, it is recognizing the items that would be acceptable for you to pass into the put method. So this is very useful. It's just going to save you a lot of time. And when you don't understand one of these things, you can go ahead and refer to the documentation pretty easily and quickly by just hitting Control Q in IntelliJ. So here it just brings up your documentation right here inside of this. So you can start reading around, and this is, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how useful this is. So again, I will stop ranting and raving about all of this kind of stuff, and I'm just going to continue working with it. But I highly encourage you to find some IDE that works well for you so it will improve your coding speed. So in here we want to go ahead and insert or put into the test table name. And the way DynamoDB works is I can basically just throw any old thing that I want in there. So if I represent a JSON object and I just start dumping stuff in there, it's just going to plain work. So let's just say I want to put in my UUID, and we'll say bucket location. So we'll be modeling something that we might use for our photo cloud. And we'll just say if faces were detected or not. And in this case, because faces were detected, we want to store the detect labels and the detect faces responses that we got. And for here, I'm not going to type this all out, so I'll just type something like test or test ASDF. So let's go ahead and change this to labels part, just so that we can see the difference. And all of this is just going to automatically be placed into our DynamoDB, and it's going to go ahead and make columns for all of this just automatically. So now let's just turn it into a promise, and we'll go ahead and output the results of what we get. And that's about it. We're going to want to make sure that we return the promise so that Lambda finishes the promise before it concludes the execution of the function. Otherwise, this can get cut off. So here we are in IAM, and we've already gone into the photo cloud policy, and I'm just going to go ahead and edit it to add the DynamoDB access that I need. Okay, so here I'm going to go ahead and add in the information that I need to control the table. I want to add this in there. This is especially important if you're working in environments where there's other tables and you don't want to accidentally create a problem for yourself. So we'll go ahead and add access to the US East 1 test table. And we'll go ahead and click Review Policy. We'll notice that it's added DynamoDB, save changes, and you'll start to recognize or get this screen after you've edited the policy 5 times. So you just delete the oldest version and save the newest. This is because they only allow you to have 5 revisions of the policy, and they automatically create those revisions for you. So we'll just go ahead and use their tool to automatically swap that out. And if I refresh this page, I should hopefully see some DynamoDB access. And if I come back here to Lambda, you'll find that DynamoDB is here. If it's not, click the refresh button and it should pop in. So now let's go ahead and test out our code again. Here's our previous attempts where it failed, and we are waiting. And here we now get our success message. So we have successfully placed this into our database, and if we want to go take a look at that, we can just bounce over here straight to the DynamoDB. And if you come over here to the Items tab and click Refresh, you'll see that our record is right there. Now, if you remember previously, the UUID column has always been there, but these 4 columns were automatically added. So they are just created on the fly. This is very useful as your application grows and you need to add new fields. However, make sure that as that happens, you take into account blank versions of the new fields for the older records. So just so we have a little bit of information in here, I'm going to bounce back to my Lambda console, and I'm going to do a little bit of work just straight in here, and I'm just going to increment some things so that I can have multiple pieces of information. Okay, there. I've created some extra information, and if I come back over here, I can see that I have some different things. This will give us the ability in the coming POC videos to be able to query these specific records and see the differences on how different items work. So I'll see you in those videos. So now we have basically an infinitely scalable NoSQL database that will respond to our every whim and store any piece of data that we throw at it. This is really, really powerful stuff, and now we don't have to worry about provisioning new servers, and we are still totally serverless with AI services, front ends, back ends, databases. It's all serverless. We just don't have to provision anything. We don't have to manage any resources. And tons of AWS engineers who are some of the smartest people on the planet are protecting our stuff. So as we go ahead and move forward in these next couple of videos, we're going to worry about getting data out now. So let's go ahead and jump in.